Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. I'm Catherine Mattice, founder and CEO of Civility Partners. We focus on often turning around toxic work environments. Some of our clients are not toxic, they're just looking for help with their culture. And I'm here today with David Bowman, and David is a former Marine helicopter crew chief. I feel like there's some probably good stories in there and how you came to do that. A trauma survivor and a certified EOS implementer and thriver coach. So entrepreneurs, today is your day. We're going to talk about self-awareness and entrepreneurship and specifically EOS. So David, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about you. It seems like you've had a cool life path. So give us the 1 minute version.
I'll try to do it in a minute. I was born in Memphis, Tennessee. Both my parents were entrepreneurs. And it was a pretty stressful, chaotic, traumatic, violent, abusive upbringing.
Wow.
And went in the Marine Corps right out of high school, which seemed like a natural trajectory for someone with no options. I got a dual degree while I was in. So I have a business and accounting degree. Got out, did a year of oil and gas revenue accounting, which, if that makes your eyes cross, it made mine too. Really hard to go from being a helicopter crew chief to sitting behind the desk for 8 to 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
So figured out pretty quickly that that wasn't for me, and learned back in the day TQM and team-based continuous improvement initiatives and things like that. I have run 3 businesses for other people, as well as starting and running my own at times. And the last one was a manufacturing company that was a turnaround and just took thousands and thousands of dollars out of the expense piece. But the owner was responsible for sales. And so I had put my system in place that I'd learned through my TQM days, and which has allowed us to do those great things. But just couldn't address the sales side. And so I brought in an EOS implementer to thinking maybe if it wasn't my system, I could get the person's attention. And he didn't show up for the first meeting. So I fell in love with EOS and figured the handwriting was on the wall. And so I walked away from that. And it's been about 8 years now, and I've never looked back.
Okay, so you grew up in systems. Also, part of being in the Marine Corps, I'm assuming, is lots of systems and everyone's in their lane, as my business coach says. So you've lived a life of systems.
Yeah, which at my core really is not me. So it took me quite a while to match up who I really am with my passions and my vocations.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to talk with you today, and I'm going to share a little bit of, and by the way, we've got lots of people saying they're looking forward to our session. So we've got a lot of, so by the way, please ask questions. And if you have something specific on your mind, pop it in there in the comments, and we'll make sure David has a chance to chat with it. And thank you, Dylan. I appreciate your comment. So earlier this year, I joke, me and my friend Anya almost broke Civility Partners because we're really great at sales. And I never knew how poor our internal systems were until we almost crashed them. I mean, it's a joke. We didn't actually almost break it, but it just was a real big eye opener that we were never going to scale unless we had systems in place, and how we just got down this path of like, there's no way we can manage all of this work without having systems. So we have been spending the last couple months, and we'll continue for the year, just really, it's the year of operations for us. It's the only way we're going to get to the next level, right? So we're not 100% in EOS yet. We're just kind of looking at our operating systems and that kind of a thing. So this is a really important topic for me because I really saw firsthand what it looks like in an organization if you don't have a system, and if people aren't in their own lane, and you got people straddling different roles and all of that. So tell us something about EOS. I know you have the model behind you there. So maybe, talk us through EOS, what value it brings, and kind of these different areas that EOS has you focusing on.
Sure. So EOS was created by Gino Wickman. And if you're interested, the book Traction is kind of the seminal book that lays all this out. But it's a system designed to help leaders get what they want from their business, which is a really loaded question. And we'll talk more about that in just a second. But it's a simple set of tools that have been around for 100 years that create a holistic system that does three things that we call vision, traction, and healthy. So vision from the standpoint of how do you get everyone in the organization completely, starting with the leadership team, that's really important, excuse me, on the same page with who you are, why you do what you do, and where you want to go as an organization. Traction from the standpoint of how do you create a structure and discipline and accountability around each person's singular responsibilities and roles in that organization. And then healthy, how do you create an open, honest culture where the leadership team actually enjoys working together, because most don't. And then the concept is, as the leadership team goes, so goes the rest of the organization. To get to the point where everybody's hyper-focused on the vision, everybody knows what their role is and how they contribute to the outcomes of the organization. And everybody's involved in a non-political, transparent environment where they're allowed to bring up issues. There are no elephants in the room. There's no sacred cows. It's just what's in the greater good of the organization. And so it just, it is completely transformative and intentional about how to run a business. And kind of the tagline of, how to get out of your own way goes back to that concept of I help people get what they want from their business. Most people don't know what they want when they start this journey.
Right.
And so by becoming intentional about how you're running the business, it ultimately turns the spotlight back on each entrepreneur to say, is this truly a reflection of who I am as a human being? And am I being true to my essence, kind of my soul? Is this the best expression of myself?
Right. I love that. I like that last piece. Is this an expression of me? Is this what I want the expression of me to look like?
Right.
So one thing is that we have partnered with some EOS implementers along the way because, we focus on toxic work environments. And so you might have a leader who's like, we need EOS. And then the EOS implementer gets in there and realizes, hey, you have somebody on your board or on your leadership team who's toxic, or I'm hearing that there's some toxic behaviors going on. Recently, an EOS implementer was talking with me about this culture of gossip in a client of his. So there's like a disconnect there because a lot of organizations don't address that one toxic leader, the bully, which is the type of person that I coach, someone who's been accused of bullying or some sort of toxic behavior. Do you come across that? And how do you reconcile that? Because that person or people who are engaging in toxic behavior are going to mess that system up.
Sure. So every day is the short answer. So the idea is one of the real emphasis is on core values, right? And so you hire, fire, reward, recognize, and discipline around your core values. The way most organizations approach core values, and even the way I used to teach it in back in my quality days, is you go off-site, you do a cross-functional team at different levels of the organization. And ultimately what happens is it's the organization telling the owner or the leaders of the organization who they want them to be versus an expression of who they actually are. So one of the things that I talk about is if you're Attila the Hun and somebody just gave you emotional intelligence as a gift, and you try to be a gentler version of yourself, when, excuse my language, but when the shit hits the fan, Attila the Hun is coming out,
Yep.
and you've just destroyed your entire culture. And so
Right.
it's the leadership saying this is who we are, and surrounding themselves with people who are like them, and it will attract positive energy, because energies attract, and it repels energies that aren't attracting. And so the gossip type of an environment becomes a core value violation. And it's the leadership team's job to point out anytime people are both living up to our core values and anytime they're falling short on our core values. And so it's through those conversations that people start to align themselves. If you can think of all the thousands of attributes that we appreciate and maybe even wish we had that we see in other people, when you have to boil it down to 3 to 5 core values, it is really a stake in the ground. And so it becomes 3 types of situations. One is just coaching and awareness, and these are our 3 to 5 core values, and here's where I'm seeing you having some trouble. 2 is we try to make everything as simple as possible. And so if you think about the complexity of human behavior, when it boils down to a binary above the bar, below the bar setting around an analysis around the core values, and everybody sets their bar based on what is acceptable in terms of core values. And so it sets up a great coaching conversation around just somebody who has those core values, but maybe aren't emphasizing them enough to be successful in their organization. Or it's a below the bar situation, and it's what we would call a strike meeting. And we think of those things as punitive, but in an EOS language, strike meetings are love. I care enough about you. I really want you to make it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you. And so, but you need to own it, and you need to figure out how to align yourself to be successful within this organization, because we're not going to compromise. And the last is we know the person's not going to make it, and they just need to go for their betterment and for the organization's betterment. I believe in coaching that there's 3 concepts. One is our DNA. So we can't do anything about it. We're as smart as we're going to be within a small range. It's our personality, which is often at our essence is set at birth. And then there's the environment that we're in. And so everybody's searching for the environment that brings out the best of their personality and their DNA and natural abilities. And so letting somebody go becomes an act of helping them find that perfect environment for themselves. So that's how we get there. So those water cooler, gossipy types of situations become core value violations that leaders are expected to address as being a violation. And there's a coaching conversation around that.
Do you find that when you, if you go to an owner and say, or CEO and say, hey, this person, we need to have this conversation, they are violating the core values. Do you find that leaders are pretty open to that? Because what I find is that the CEO often really wants to find a way to keep that person because they are super valuable. And the reason that person has been allowed to behave that way for 2, 3, 5, sometimes 10 years is there's some sort of rainmaker. They have a lot of organizational knowledge. There's something that where the CEO is kind of living in fear. If I hold you accountable, you might leave or retaliate in some way. So that's what I experience in coaching. And by the way, have the same conversation with CEOs where we say, look, when you present coaching, I'm not the principal. I'm giving you a gift because I need you to change. And so this person specializes in coaching people with your kind of complaints, and she's going to help you, and I'm investing in you. Nobody else is getting this specialized coaching. So I was just curious what the CEO's reactions are when you have that conversation.
So trying to decide where to start here. Most of the organizations that I work with have crazy visionary CEOs, right? They're the founder of their organization. They have this mental model of how everything should work in their heads. And kind of everything is a on the fly learning opportunity for everybody to align to their model. I consider myself in that visionary mode. And so don't like discipline and constraints and systems and things like that. But I believe in people, and I've held on to people for way too long because I really think they can make it. I'm just right. And so when the owner that is that type of crazy visionary is also what we would call the integrator for the organization, the one who is keeping the trains moving on time and making sure everything is very linear. And you need both, right? You need that crazy visionary, but in a role where they thrive, and then they need to complement themselves with an integrator that can have those hard conversations and are looking at the P&L and looking at who's contributing and who's not. My experience over 40 years of being in business is that we way overemphasize. First of all, making a decision out of fear or not making a decision out of fear is never a great motivator. No. And it's always overblown. And so what happens is those supposed superstars that are actually cancers to the culture of your organization are doing it on the backs of the other people in the organization. So I'm the $1 million salesperson who's promising things that we can't deliver. I'm creating timelines that we can't deliver to. My paperwork is awful, and I have other team members going behind me and cleaning up all my messes. And when you let me go, it's like this collective sigh of relief throughout the organization. And that person has been holding other people down because they're great self-promoters and we believe that they're these superstars. And you will see people just rise to the surface and shine and
100%
be their best selves.
That's what I talk about that a lot too, of like the ROI. You might have someone making you $1 million, but then you figure all of the time spent cleaning up their messes, scrambling to get things done based on those timelines and all of this chaos they create, that maybe that $1 million sales is actually only $300,000 in sales. And just because you can't see that 700 grand in costs, it's there, right? And then that sigh of relief. So what's your favorite part about EOS implementation? What are some of the real fun things you get to do when you're working with clients? Or maybe you have a really cool case study that you could share. And again, do ask questions of everyone who's listening in. We're getting lots of comments. We'd love to get your questions and comments.
Sure. So probably too many to talk about. So I love when our own thinking. So the idea that we have to be this intentional about how we run our organization before eventually turns the spotlight inward. And so the idea that this crazy frenetic pace that I thought it took to create this organization, and now I'm able to have peace and I have some extra time and I'm in a role that I really love and I'm my best self. It is just transformational personally. And so that's really where my trigger gets tripped, is when we get out of our own way and we quit buying into the historical self-talk of all the shoulda, woulda, couldas, and the sense of will. And if you're a crazy visionary, you get these teachable moments, and then you dive in to show them what you're talking about, and you make all these promises, and you get things stirred up for about 90 days, and then we're ADD, so we lose interest, and then there's another teachable moment, and this team feels like I let them down because everything is now funneled through my energy, and now I go off over here, and I never feel like I'm as productive as I could be. I'm really hard on myself. I can't. I want to. The answer is always to pedal faster, and it's exactly the opposite. It's the more you slow down, the more you can reflect on truly what I want.
Mhm.
And what I want is joy and happiness and fulfillment. And we tend to replace those with a bottom line number and
Mhm.
cars and spouses and all of those kinds of things, as though they're going to give us the joy and the satisfaction in life. When really, if you can calm down and sit back and watch things unfold, it is the most creative experience and the most fulfilling experience. And I get to watch entrepreneurs do that every single day.
I love that. That's awesome. I feel that with this almost breaking civility partners, and now we're kind of rebuilding internally. I have been watching. I have Rebecca has been with me for 6 years, and she really took on the implementer role, and she's always kind of been that. But with EOS on mind, it's like, she's fairly young, but pretty awesome. And sometimes she's talking to me about something, and I'm just looking at her beaming. She's like, "Why are you looking at me like that?" I'm like, "Because I'm so proud of
Exactly.
you." So I love that. I mean, that certainly would bring you a lot of joy. I can see that. So you're saying essentially that entrepreneurial success is about having a business that runs without you, where you get to shine as the visionary and be creative and crazy, and then other people make things happen. Work-life balance is probably something all of us seek. So other thoughts on kind of what does it look like to be successful if you're an entrepreneur? What does that mean?
So we have what we call the living the EOS life.
Okay.
And so I try to live my life this way, and I want to bring this to every organization, leadership team, and individual. And it consists of 5 things. 1, do what you love, do it with people that you love, make a huge impact, be fairly compensated, and have time for other passions. And so how do you build every role of the organization around those 5 things?
Mm-hmm.
And not only will you have a financially successful organization, you will have an emotionally successful organization, and you will have peace, and you will have joy, and you will have the things that truly matter in life.
And that's where we align, David, because that's what I'm focused on too, through the idea of culture. And yeah, I see and talk to a lot of very unhappy people, and I just feel like, based on, I got into what I do because of someone working with someone who was kind of a bully, and it's like, I just think what we do for work is such an important part of who we are and our self-concept and our self-esteem. And when you first meet someone at a party or wherever, it's often the first question, what do you do? And sometimes when you ask someone that, they'll say, "Oh, I don't define people by their job." It's like, no matter how you slice and dice it, we do define ourselves by our job, and many other things, but that's one of the ways we define ourselves. And so people have to feel good at work. It is. You have to, and I think it's irresponsible for leaders to not focus on how their people feel. And sometimes I go, why do I even have a job? If CEOs just paid more attention, it would be fine. But
Well, one way that I've begun to look at things is I've kind of transformed to, I guess, a more aware approach with my own behaviors, is the worse the behavior, the bigger the past trauma that they're carrying. And so instead of anger and retaliating back, and those types of people trigger me, it becomes more, I can have compassion for them, because why would somebody choose to behave that way, right? And so if I can help them uncover that trauma and uncover that thinking is getting in their own way, and that they don't have to carry that baggage with them, and they can let it go, is amazingly powerful.
yeah,
And so it's turning it where those people used to trigger me to, I feel compassion for them, that they're in that much pain that they have to build themselves up by tearing other people down.
yeah, David, again, and we're definitely in line. I've discovered through my 10 years of coaching leaders who engage in toxic behaviors, that they all, one of several things they have in common is that they've all been fighting for something their whole life. And it varies. Might have been abusive parents. It might have been, I coached a woman who came, she was the sixth child in China, literally grew up on the crumbs of whatever was left after, every child gets to eat in order. Literally grew up on whatever was left after everybody else was done, came to America, didn't speak English, and now she's got a PhD and runs the quality control at a big pharmaceutical company. But, and I coached a doctor who was the only woman in medical school, not to mention a single mom in medical school, so it's like they've all been fighting for something. And I feel the same, that part of my job sometimes in coaching is just to help them see that you don't have to fight so hard to look competent. Right. People already think you're competent. Like, you're good now. You're the executive VP. You've gotten pretty far. So I agree. I kind of joke that they're my delicate little flowers. They need some TLC, and I also have a lot of compassion for them. We've got a great. Oh, go ahead.
My journey began with really sitting. COVID was a big beneficial component of this. What would it feel like if I didn't have anything to prove to anybody? How would I behave if I didn't have anything to prove to anybody?
Yeah.
And so just that question consumed me for over a year.
It's a great question.
Yeah, and so if you come from that place, you're getting closer to the essence of who you are.
Yeah. I might be on the beach in somewhere at some other country. All right. So Laura has a question. How do you maintain a balance if you are starting a new business by yourself? Let me put this up here. In that situation, you have to perform most of the roles yourself. So how do you, it's kind of every startup's problem. How do you get that balance?
I would say, first of all, it's no different than being further along in this journey. The balance is to let go of the outcomes, right? So once you have preferences around what it should look like at certain points in time, then you're going to have a series, you're going to frame things as failures, right? And so instead of it, I'm going to learn the lessons that it's going to take, and I'm going to take joy in the journey of my startup, and know that part of a startup is I'm going to have a tremendous number of failures, and those failures are going to get me closer and closer to my ideal life. And so it's when we start putting our preferences and we care about the outcomes and not the way we get to the outcomes that gives us dissatisfaction.
I love that. So you have your vision, you're setting up kind of here's where we're headed, but recognizing we're going to fail a bunch of times. And those are just lessons learned.
Right.
If you never fail, that's a problem.
That is a big problem.
Angelique says,
that's good. Not doing anything.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, David, for being here. This video will live here forever. So if anybody wants to rewatch it or comment or get in touch with David, certainly he's on LinkedIn. What is your website, David? So
it's a mouthful. So it's eosworldwide.com. That's the easiest way to get to me. And then there's an implementer list, and I'll be listed on the implementers.
Okay, gotcha. And or you're on LinkedIn, and people can just click on your name here on this very page. All right. Well, thank you so much. I figured out finally how to share my screen because we're doing SHRM activity IDs. So if you are SHRM, you have your unique continuing education credits for SHRM. Here's your activity ID. You get 0.5 of an hour. So I'll leave that up there as we say goodbye. Thanks again, David, so much. I really appreciated this chat, and I'll see you all next week.
It's been a pleasure.